Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, that's super loud. Good morning. No, it's not. I just hearing myself. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Advanced Cinema Tools panel. I am joined by a very, very, very respected group of individuals here, myself excluded. But I would like to introduce everyone down the line in no particular order, or just in the order in which they're sitting to me. Matt Workman, creator and founder of Cinematography Database, also a plugin for Cinema 4D called Cine Designer. For those of you that have not used it, we'll play a little bit with it today. We'll do a very brief live demo, but it's a very cool visualization program that lets you basically plug in your lighting, plug in your camera positions, your camera moves in a virtual environment before you commit to anything on location. Very unique tool. To his immediate right is Adam Wilt, also DP, director, and also designer of Cinemeter 1 and Cinemeter 2. Very, very cool light meter utility for the device that we all have in our hands, which is your phone or your iPad. All right. To his right, Nick Sadler, also a DP as well, but also a partner of Chemical Wedding. Chemical Wedding is a company that designs several applications that you may have all used. Helios is one of them. Artemis, which we'll be showing us today, I believe, is another one. Very useful cinematography tools, again, for the modern cinematographer, if you will. And last but certainly not least, Patrick Renner from Pomfort, creators of LiveGrade Air, also Silver Stack, and now the new Silver Stack Pro, I think it's called. I forget what it was. Lab. Darn it, I got the last thing wrong. But again, very useful on-set applications. I use LiveGrade Air and LiveGrade all the time. Right, DITs have it on all their carts. Great sort of live LUT loading capabilities for all the on-set work, especially when you're shooting with log footage and your clients want to see it in something that's not log. So thank you guys so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you guys. I think before we start, just to give everyone an audience and the live stream audience an idea of what you folks are working on, maybe it'd be good to open up with just a quick demo of the various applications that you generally use. I know not everyone has a live demo, so for those of you that are watching online, be sure to check out the various websites. But for those that are here in the live audience, we could start, since Adam, you already plugged in, I believe. We'll start with Adam Wilt and Cinemeter. If you want to just spend a few seconds going into what it is and some of the brief functionalities and sort of what inspired you to make this program, it'd be great.
Sure. So I'll drive the iPhone with one hand while I hold the microphone with the other one.
I'll hold the microphone for you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Cinemeter is a light meter and color meter with a built-in waveform monitor that runs on an iPhone or iPad. So assuming that it's up there now, which it's not.
Sorry, technical, hang on.
Oh dear, have to log into the computer.
There it is.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Here it is in incident mode. I've got a $30 photosphere that clips over the front camera, so I can run in incident mode. And this will give me all my usual sorts of controls. And I can adjust shutter speeds and see shutter angles at the same time, and then see what my resulting f-stop is. Or I can, for example, hold down on shutter speed, and now I can have that change when I change my aperture or I change my ISO directly. So it can be aperture priority, shutter priority, ND priority, whatever you see fit. And a variety of shutter speeds as well, shutter angles. And in the upper right-hand corner, I'm getting the color temperature and tint value for the light that's coming in. And the lower right-hand corner, the LUTs value or the candles per meter squared. There's also a reflected mode. So I'll use the front camera for that, and I can zoom in and do spot readings on people. And I also get a waveform monitor that's in Luma only, RGB, or YRGB, which is very handy for looking at color evenness on green screens. For example, on this shirt, would this shirt be a good tier? There's pretty good separation between the blue and the other colors, but I might want a bit more for a clean tee. And that's it. It's basically a light meter in your pocket with a color meter built in.
Great, thank you, Adam. And like you said, it's something that's built in. So maybe we'll transition the cable over to Nick. Sorry. But while we get that working, again, it's a light meter that you have in your pocket. You're always walking around. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always walking around saying, oh, that's a great scene. That's a great setup. I'd love to shoot there one day.
Yeah, and it doesn't have quite the buttons and controls that a hardwired light meter has, but the best light meter is the light meter you've got with you. And if the other light meter is in the pouch back in the hotel room and your phone is on you, you can take a reading anywhere.
Okay. So,
hello.
Is anyone an Artemis user here already? Okay, there's a couple. Okay, so what this is very briefly, wait for the image to come up, we're almost there.
Yeah, sorry, technical, oops.
So Artemis was developed about 6 or 7 years ago. I'm a cinematographer, and I kind of make tools that work for me when I'm working. I do mainly commercials and TV shows and TV specials, that kind of thing. Okay. So how this works very quickly is you select a camera by tapping the top of the screen here. You can pick any camera you like Alexa SXT. You choose a shooting ratio, a shooting format like OpenGate 178. You then pick a lens from a comprehensive database of lenses, like Panavision Primos. They're not here. Press done. And this generates a wireform of all the lenses you've got in your selection. You can then go into this, and then you can zoom in and preview what each of your lenses will look like. You can then take a picture and save that picture to a database, and then you can preview those pictures afterwards, or send them out to people that you're working with to say, hey, this is what we're doing on this particular shot. So Artemis has been out for 7 years. We've got about 20,000 active users a day. And over time, what Artemis has done as an application, when I first released it, people thought, well, it's an iPhone application, it's not really a professional tool. It took a little while for people's perception to change. The film industry is a weird environment in that we would deal with very technical equipment, but everything around it is actually non-technical. Like, we're still using Excel for most things. We still have a call sheet, which is this piece of paper with lots of information on it that we don't need. We just need one little part of it. So there's a certain part of the film industry that's really reluctant to forms of technology like this. So it's taken 7 years really for Artemis to really catch on, and now it's pretty ubiquitous. Most cinematographers that are working have used it in some way, shape, or form. The other application that we did, I'm just quickly going to swap devices. Can you see that? Is that coming up?
Sorry, still working on it. Hang on.
So the very first application we did as a company was to reproduce an application that was a desktop application for cinematographers called SunPath. And SunPath was a way of predicting where the sun would be at any point while you're shooting. And the first way that I used to do it is I used to get this almanac of astronomical data that was designed for pilots. And then there was an application for the desktop computer called SunPath, and we used to print out these sheets that would tell us all the information about where the sun would be. So we turned that into our first iPad application, or iPhone application, about 6 or 7 years ago. How this works at the moment is we're pushing towards a more VR-based interface. So with this particular application, we get from the web the data about any specific location. Now I think I'm going to not have connectivity.
So normally, if you had internet connection, you would see like a street view, like a Google Maps type of view.
So I'll show you the other parts of the interface. If we're on location and we want to look at someone in position, we can look at them in terms of how the sun would affect them if throughout the course of the day. So we can see if we want to put someone in a shot, we'd be able to organize them as they would appear on the compass, and then look at them in terms of how the sun is going to light that person on that particular day. So if we're on a scout, even if you're actually not going to the location, you can look at a map, put a figure in the environment or a building. We can show you a building here, and we can predict how the shadows are going to travel around. So it's enormously important for cinematographers in terms of planning, but also stills photographers, other people in the industry. So that's that application. And we're going to quickly swap to one more to show you very quickly. Cool. You've seen one of these before. This is a standard director's viewfinder. It's an optical device you look through like this. These devices have been used in the film industry for 100 years. So, and this particular device here, I had a hand in designing about 20 years ago. This is the one made by Ariflex. Ooh, can I swap with you again? Right, I need the cable.
It's a good thing we have an hour, right? No.
Yeah.
I'm teasing.
You seeing that? Sorry about this. I'll be with you in a moment. So what this is it's a move on from what Artemis does. The iPhone application you keep in your pocket gives you a rough idea of what particular lenses will do. What this is, it's a way of actually taking the actual lens you're going to be using, putting that inside exactly the same interface, and being able to give cinematographers tools that are going to be able to help you express exactly what you want to do. So if I'm going on a job and I say to the director, we're doing an over-the-shoulder, I can tap on the screen, pull up an over-the-shoulder, position that like this, recolor it. I can then go to here and I can apply looks to the frame. So I can apply a lookup table to give a director a bit of a preview of what kind of grading look we're going to use. I can adjust exposure within the system, and all this is based around taking a picture and then being able to show the director that picture, or maybe send that to the art director and say, hey, this is what we're up to. So this is a fairly new device. This is currently on 20 movies at the moment, kind of medium to kind of big budget films. It's a departure from the way in which people normally work, which is using a director's viewfinder, which is a very personal experience with you and the director. The whole idea of these tools is to expand your vision as a cinematographer so other people can see you build it as an author. What's happened to us in the digital world is, I'll borrow this for a moment. What's happened to us in the digital world is our, as a cinematographers, our ownership of the image has been hugely eroded. So what my mission is to try and create tools that, yeah, I'm sure. You got that? Well, my mission as a cinematographer is to create tools that allows the cinematographer to have a greater control of authorship when it's actually happening on set. What usually happens is that the monitor gets turned on, that everyone looks at the monitor, and the very, very first thing they see, they're enormously seduced by. It's kind of a normal human reaction to see an image for the first time and kind of fall in love with it. So as a DP, what I'm trying to do is have a moment with the director where I build the image, say, this is what we're going to do, and then when the monitor gets turned on, they know that's not what we're doing. We're moving towards something that you've already shown. It's a bit like a sketchpad idea of the world. So that's the panoply of our applications at the moment.
Thank you. And actually, just a great segue, because you mentioned loading LUTs into this application. So when we talk about LUTs, you can't not mention the word Pomfort, or the company Pomfort. So while we transition to Matt's laptop, I'll ask Patrick there. So in your own words, can you describe, I guess, the various applications that Pomfort's built? I know, again, there's LiveGrade and there's also SilverStack, two different applications. But specifically going into the LUTs, can you talk a little bit about LiveGrade and LiveGrade Air, please?
Yes, talking about LiveGrade, this was a typical application that happened to us as a company. Was like that all of a sudden, when you were taking away the lab from the process, kind of the thing that separated post from production was gone, and all of a sudden things came from post-production to the film set, because there were already devices like digital cinema cameras capable of a lot of digital things, having nice signals as the output. And now some tasks already started that are post-production tasks, like handling files, having monitors with digital signals. I mean, if you imagine how it's just 7 years that ARRI announced their HD output of 35mm cameras, and that was the cool thing, actually. So that's really just a few years ago. But that switched the possibilities changed totally when you really remove the lab. And our products are fit exactly in that position, where all of a sudden either simulations of what you can do in post or tasks that now move towards the camera have to be done on a film set. And this means that it's computers, notebooks, storage devices, cables, devices, digital devices are now moving or are like regularly used on a film set. LiveGrade is one tool where you can, in the chain between the camera and the monitor, you need one device that does some color processing. It could be the camera itself. The more and more cameras are supporting that. The monitor can do that sometimes, or you add an additional box that does the color processing, and our software is like controlling the device that's doing it, and apply a lookup table and a look and some color pipeline to the image that simulates what then could be done in post-production. And for us, it's not only a technical thing, like converting log to video or something, but it's much more a creative tool for the DP to use. So that's giving. You mentioned that giving back the creative tools to the DP, not just delivering a clean image, but having a creative intent and putting that further into post-production. So the example I've created, you not only get a preview of what you could be done in post-production, but you can then store this metadata and use it to create dailies. So now you get the exact same image that the DP saw on that nice monitor on the film set, put that look again onto the flat recorded raw image of the camera and get the exact image in dailies. And that's where you look for months sometimes and get used to that image and fall in love with it. And that's kind of what DP's like, is having tools that get their creative intent further down to post-production. So that's then maybe 2 sentences about Silverstack so that we
Absolutely.
So Silverstack is another task that went closer to cameras, like really copying cards to travel drives, backups, doing checksums of all this data. So more like the boring stuff in a way, but the necessary stuff, creating reports of the footage that has been shot, preparing metadata for different other tools. So that's kind of a little bit of a media asset management for the film set that's on one card, that's independent of infrastructure, that's just that one system that takes care of maybe an entire production, an whole episode of shooting.
You know, it's interesting too. The film industry, generally speaking, the roles on set haven't changed a lot when you look at cinematographer, directors, etc., line producers. But when we're talking about the assistants, you know, the second AC is no longer loading film. You have now DITs and wranglers and utilities persons. And I think it's interesting that you guys in some way are reinventing what is happening on set. I mean, digital cinema is not new, obviously, but the past 10, 15 years, you've had to come up with new ways to fix, well, not really fix, but come up with new ways to address the workflow issues that we've always had. And that's really what you're doing with even just the looks, right? Because that used to be the rushes or printer lights and, you know, getting dailies done. Or even, you just mentioned it's not very sexy. Media management is
at
not
least
glamorous.
sometimes. Yeah.
My wife uses the word metadata as a joke around the house. Right. If she doesn't understand it, she says, yeah, it's metadata.
Yeah.
Because when I talk about it with people, it's like, it's two things. Metadata is really important and the most boring thing in the world.
Right.
But without it, there's nothing that we can do with, we're all doing roughly the same thing. We need to be able to get metadata to be, to realize its importance, to harness the power it has and to make it invisible. But all of those things at the same time are very difficult to do. Like, you know, you expect that when the editor opens a file that comes from Patrick's software, the LUT is automatically applied, and then the editor just gets on with it, and then they can look at a file with all the notes that came from everybody. You can look at the costume designer's notes, they can look at the art director's notes about what was actually happening, so the editor has got a good idea of what was the intent was. But that's a mess right now. It's a total mess. And there's no stomach to fix it from within the industry because it's got no commercial value in an obvious sense. Now, the other part of the equation is that if people adopted the systems that we're interested in, it would save them a shit ton of money. But they don't care because it's already in the budget on this line. So we're trying to push forward a new way of working, but there's this massive resistance to it. So we're pushing, even products like this, which I'll show to cinematographers, some of them are enthusiastic, some of them are hugely skeptical because it kind of interferes with their particular workflow. And I come back to what I said earlier on, the film industry is enormously technical, but at the same time we use these practices that are absolutely arcane. They're ridiculous. I mean, we should have a call sheet system whereby you get a text notification in your phone with a map and the directions all built in and you just go there. But instead we get sent a PDF generated out of an Excel spreadsheet.
And those tall sheet systems do exist, and I don't see them being used anywhere.
No one uses them. Yeah.
And back to the metadata in the editing process, I used to work for Omnion, now part of Harmonic, and we were working on integration of nonlinear editing into media servers and in taking metadata in. So I had been talking with various nonlinear editor manufacturers, names I think I'm still under NDA, I can't talk about 10 years later, but this has been something we've been working on for over a decade. And certain people like Adobe have gone a long way to try in their halting and clumsy way to integrate this into the production process. The first company that really cracks it can own the market. Yeah, but again, it requires people to understand this horribly confusing and horribly boring thing and how it helps them out, and to adopt it throughout the entire workflow. And part of the problem is that production is still so siloed between pre and production and post. And I don't have to fix this now because it's someone else's budget to fix it later. But if someone actually gets the idea of integrating this all together, it's going to work so well, we'll wonder how we ever did without it.
Yeah, that's the important part of this equation, is that once we get over this really boring problem with a solution, everyone will look back at it and think, they'll think it in the same way that they think of mobile phones. How the hell did we get on in life without these? It'll be that kind of point. If you took the mobile phone away from somebody, I heard this show the other day, there was this university lecturer who was offering small amounts of money to his students to take their mobile phone away from them. And he did this over time, and he got up to like $200 a day was the amount of money it would take for someone to give their phone away. And until one student basically said, well, if I could take the 200, I can then clone my phone to the net, go and buy a second-hand phone, and get up and going for like 150, so I'm at $50 in front. That's the way his brain was working. So this within what we're doing, we're trying to push forward on this change in technology that will help everybody, but there's still this enormous resistance to it. It's a really strange thing.
Especially with consumer devices like iPhones and iPads. Some people get it right away, and so Cinemeter, of course, you're running with a $15 camera module. It's unlikely that the millions of iPhones that are being produced are being calibrated to the 10th of a stop. So they're plus or minus a stop, and to make Cinemeter work right, you have to calibrate it against another meter or a reference. Once you've done that, it's within a 10th of a stop over the useful range of light. Some people get that, they like it, they've got a light meter with them other times. Other people say, that's a consumer device. That will never work. I refuse to look at it. So, it's attitudinal as much as anything else as to whether these technologies get taken up and adopted.
So I definitely want to expand on that because that's a really interesting point. But first I want to get Matt Workman's software up on the screen for everyone to see. So this is Cine Designer, which you've built as a plugin for Cinema 4D. Looks like you've built a scene already. I'll hold your mic for you if you want.
I'll hold it for a second. Hey guys, how's it going? I was a commercial DP for about 10 years, and in that time a lot has changed. More things have become virtual. There's a lot more collaboration with visual effects supervisors. This is the same front on big music videos, big movies. There's a lot more collaboration the DP typically has to do with visual effects, especially when the entire set is CG. And with that, I feel like the DP has lost a little bit of ground and say and authority over even pre-production meetings. Many are not even invited. I was part of this change, being young as well, also perhaps not having as much say as a visual effects supervisor from the mill. And to combat the loss of ground that DPs were having, I created my own 3D pre-visualization software. Whereas a visual effects supervisor on a very complex production will bring a 3D model of where they think the camera should go, what the lighting should look like. This happens in Hollywood. This happens in New York City on commercials. DPs, we didn't have anything to really speak that language, so I created this software to speak that language. I actually originally created this software with the mill as a DP and the visual effects company, and I made it in Maya, and I was going to sell it to them, but then I killed that program and I made this version, and this is only for filmmakers, and it's a consumer level product because they don't need any more help. This is for the DPs. So what we've been doing is one by one. As you see, I dragged, this is an aperture light because I'm an aperture ambassador today for this NAB run. This is a model of a 120 daylight, and it's an area light. It moves around. We've essentially mapped 3D lights onto movie lights. And I've one by one gone through each manufacturer, and I'm adding them more and more. I was at a lovely dinner party with Ari last night speaking about sky panel integration. I am next week, May 7th, Leonard Chapman, presenting at their product showcase. We're adding all of their cranes and their dollies. and I'm going to be doing this for every single company in the film industry. We'll see a little scene here as a Fisher 10 dolly. So I have each one of these things built modularly. So this is a Fisher 10. It's programmed to respect the height of a Fisher 10. We can go very deep into the optics of this. I can do optical representations of mapped lenses, known lenses. That's an expensive process that me and another company will have to share the burden of, but they already exist. This is an original slider. So these are not generics. These are based directly on, many times, the SolidWorks CADs of the exact manufactured product. The photometrics of the lights is a tricky thing, and that's, again, something else I'll have to split the cost of the R&D for that kind of stuff. But this is software that does exist in forms in pre-visualization companies have this. The Third Floor, Halon, I'm friends with all of these people. They have it, and they use it, but the DPs don't use it. So if you're a DP, it doesn't matter your status. As you walk onto a set that is very large, the set has been designed already, the shots designed, the lighting designed, you are execution in many, many cases. Not in all cases, depending on the DP level. But with this, you're allowed to now bring in your visualization of it as well. At launch, many ASC DPs joined this movement to bring our knowledge of practical cinematography into the virtual world, the application of where this is moving into AR and virtual reality, to be able to operate as a cinematographer in a purely virtual environment. This is part of that transition. Many people, very, very frightened of that thought, doesn't even register. I should be in Southall, right? I shouldn't be in production and acquisition, but I represent production and acquisition one-to-one. And I'm going to turn on one more light here. Which one is it? This spotlight. I usually have a Wacom Tablet, so that's it coming through the window. This goes way farther. We have technocranes. We've got all sorts of things. As I render this out, it's very small because I'm running it off of this laptop. You can run this system very easily off a MacBook Pro. What we're moving is similar to a model like QTake, where it is a turnkey solution with a very high-end laptop, very tuned for it, and it eliminates this rendering process. It's all real-time. So you want to design a technocrane move. I have an integration with Alpha Wheels. So if you want to control the remote head live, we already have that integration. You want to move the exact crane to a specific height, look down and understand if what you're seeing, how wide it is. We have the film backs built of all the Red cameras, the Alexa Open Gate. We have that all built into this. You can look virtually at it. The best part is you don't have to design the sets. On a big enough set, the production designer, if they're doing their job, has the set built in 3D. If it's not to scale, you tell them to build it to scale. They send it to you. It goes right in here. You add a couple virtual people. You add the lights like you would in real life. You look through it as well. Bigger DPs don't have the time for this. They don't want it. I can't say their names who are using this software right now. There's a new position on set arising for someone that is an intermediate between the DP, the production designer, the director, the lighting department, to generate this in pre-production, to keep it updated, and to communicate with the visual effects department. Anyone familiar with virtual production, this is already happening, but the DP is not invited to that meeting. Okay, so this is a step for DPs who are interested in having a seat at that table. This is your only way in. Otherwise, you don't play. You're not even invited. You're not paid for that pre-production time, and you're not invited to the process of understanding the virtual lighting that will be happening. Different people have different point of views on it. That's mine. So that's a small render out of it. We're working on technology as NVIDIA and certain companies allow this to be faster and faster. This is a real-time situation, and very much like the viewfinder you have as well there. Technology like Snapchat, what Apple's developing behind the scenes for the smart driving cars, we'll be able to put up, perhaps on just a Google Glass, rapidly 3D model the room, and I can just add 3D models right into that AR, VR. I can relight this scene in that shot. You could publish that and go to air with that if you wanted to, or you can use it as pre-visualization, very similar to pulling up Google Earth, and such as that we have another company in the works to rapidly 3D model every soundstage in the world. Locations that are already scanned, I'm working on figuring out how to get the licenses of those. Times Square, you want to look what Times Square looks like on a Panavision Primo 30 mil on the end of a 50-foot technocrane. What's the height it can go and look straight down? What is that exact volume? What does the lighting look like at a certain time of day? What does it look like with two 18Ks versus a 20 by versus all that stuff? We're building that, and we're trying to eliminate the rendering time. I'd love this to work on mobile and that sort of thing. Already speaking with Autodesk. Maxon doesn't care so much about this, unfortunately. I've sold hundreds of thousands of dollars of Cinema 4D licenses for them. But this is really for the filmmakers. That's what I've been building. It started as a use for me as a DP to have a communication layer in the agency meetings, and I've armed it and given it to cinematographers. Many ASC DPs working on it, training their assistants for it. slowly becoming a part of every single film school's education platform. You can understand the education implications for software like this. And moving into virtual reality, there's a lot of other options. So that is called Cine Designer at cinedesigner.com. That's what I've been building.
Well, thank you for that. That was it's really cool to see that in action too, especially being driven by the person that wrote the code for it. So going back a little bit to what we guys were saying earlier, how do you combat the general sort of naysayer attitude of a lot of the, I won't say old timers, but that's kind of what I'm saying. The attitude that, no, this is not how we've been doing it. I don't want to change. Like, we've been doing it this way for years. How do you guys combat that? Like, what is your approach?
Who's going to get paid? That's it.
Right.
Like, there'll come a point where if you can't deliver the kinds of things that you've been talking about with regards to pre-visualization as a cinematographer, you're just going to you're going to fall by the wayside. That's with
Test.
the changes in the way in which things are happening with regards to even treatments to get jobs done. Like I get a director coming to me and saying, "Hey, we need to generate images for this job, and so we need to show exactly what we're going to be doing." And so you go through Getty Images and start ripping off images, and I'm altering pictures, and I'm getting involved in that part of the process. So really, the pre-visualization side is becoming quite a big part of our jobs. And as we move forward, we need to get better and better at it because our competition will get better at it, or another department is going to take that away from us, exactly like you're saying.
The art department is the union regulated one who is supposed to be doing the 3D previs.
Yeah.
Union, it's the art department who's planning the angles. And it starts with them building the sets. It's fair, that's not the DP's job. But then if we're not working in 3D, maybe they'll suggest an angle, right? And if that angle is what gets sold up the chain because they've been doing that, maybe that's what we go with.
Yeah.
Maybe they just quickly throw some quick lighting in there just to illuminate the set. That's what it looks like. If that goes through the chain all the way, the art department starts to have influence over it. And the art department's on well before the cinematographer.
Our control over what's going on with the image as cinematographers is being eroded anyway. And it's being eroded not only by changes in technology and changes of attitude, particularly with regards to monitoring. Like when the monitor goes on, it never used to be an issue for us. They'd see us waving at our light meters and walking around the set, and then 2 days later they'd see the image and everyone would go, "Christ, look at that, it's amazing." Now they see it forming in front of them, and that becomes a real problem for us. So our ability to pre-visualize and harness that it's really important. And tools, like all these tools, as cinematographers, we've got to get on top of them. Otherwise, someone else is going to do it for us, and our role will be even more eroded.
We're already behind many years.
Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
And it's a cultural thing. This is a social industry like anything else. And if you refuse to use a tool, but your buddy's using it, something like Artemis, how can you possibly model an Arri lens or a Cook lens with an iPhone? But when your buddy uses it and he's getting accurate ideas of what his focal lengths will be, maybe you'll pick it up and try it. It's cheap. This is an unusual evolution for this industry in that certainly our tools are, they're less than $100, they're less than $50. It's coffee money to try it out and see if it works. And maybe, okay, it's this crummy little consumer device. It can't possibly help me because I'm a professional, but maybe it does help after all. And it just gets integrated over the period of time as it becomes a more normal thing for people to use. We're not all using, $80,000 film cameras anymore, and somehow we've adjusted to cheap, nasty digital things that run around on set and manage to turn out halfway decent pictures. And that happens throughout the production chain.
There's no commercial DP worth their salt under 30 not using Artemis.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you said that.
And screen printing on a location scout, printing, there's boards, and then you shoot the boards on the scout.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think, it sounds like you're saying it's an age issue, or what is it, adaptation issue of folks that are more in tune with the technology?
It's cultural. It's what you imprint on when you're growing up and learning the craft, and you get imprinted on a certain set of tools and a certain way of working. And some people get that far, and they lock it in, and they never change. And I know some old guys and some not so old guys who are set in a time period, and they will be that way till they die. I know other people who have many more gray hairs than I have and maybe ever will have, who are hip with the jive and using the current stuff the instant it comes out. So it depends on the personality and the adaptability of the DP and the operator and what they're comfortable doing. And it's sort of nasty to say, but it's an adapt or die world.
This is kind of going a little bit into what we were saying earlier about workflow. So technology is supposed to help us, right, in general, just not just in this industry, but in general, right? Your smart cars, smart homes, your light bulbs turn on when you get there, your thermostat's all set, and the coffee's already brewing. But
It's a nice theory.
right.
In your house, maybe.
It drives my girlfriend crazy, trust me. Everything's automatic. But I've also noticed this trend that because the picture now comes to the monitors in a very beautiful way, because someone is behind the wheels of a Pomfort station, a live grade station, now is there a recurring trend of now, wait a minute, let's make that adjustment here and there, right? Because it used to be video assist, which just used to be for framing and performance. Now everyone's an expert that sees a monitor, and now everyone wants color accuracy, even though they're just maybe production, there's script supervising or whatnot. So, and maybe this is more for Patrick, but do you see that this is I don't want to say backwards step, but the goal is to move forward, but yet we're taking more time to develop the look on location versus doing it in the lab or in post?
Yeah, I see this as a challenge that we as a manufacturer or like developer of software products are like, this is our job to kind of think about that. And how I see it is there are several kind of things that need to be balanced in a product that we offer to filmmakers, to crew on a film set. And the one is that that you all of a sudden now go to Fry's Electronics and buy things for a movie production, which I understand that this is something that you're like, is that the right things to do? And we ourselves who sell software being run on notebooks on a film set, is the notebook the right tool on a film set? Is it like the cables and the fiddly things? And so is that if you look 20 years back, how rugged and professionally made these things were, and now it's very different. But so I understand a little bit that there is hesitation at least and say, is this really the right thing? So you need to show the benefit. And then there's the other thing that you mentioned is like how much opportunity to waste time do you kind of provide with your products? Because that will be a shiny effect on a trade show or even if a demo or a workshop. But then using it from a day-to-day routine in a film production, you recognize very early that there is not unlimited time. It's the opposite on a film set. So we feel it's our job to limit features and take away from users and be slowly and not too much at a time and see where the direction really is, where the benefit goes. And that's, we see as our responsibility also to like make slow steps. And so that's why, for example, in Live Grade, we for a very long time kept the color manipulations to primary grading only. So it's really just CDL because people are asking us, oh, power window here would be good and could be secondaries there and things. And it sounds good if you like have additional features and the flexibility, but in a way there is only so much time on a film set that you have. So that's why I think it's a responsibility that we have to take and the feedback is direct. So if it's like a waste of time to use it or it's like too distracting, people won't use it in the long term. So
it's an interesting phenomenon because it's the application we make for Artemis, which is $30, which is an expensive application. For a while, it was the most expensive application in the iTunes store when we first made it, and people were horrified that this application is $30. Then I had to impress on people that what we were replacing was a $600 device. So you buy an Alan Gordon viewfinder, $600. People still complain that it's $30. So I don't want to buy it. I'll buy something else cheaper. And I say, fine, if you can't afford it, go and get that. But we want to service a professional environment. But it slips out of cinematography into the producing department as well, because touching on what you were saying before, that there's this perception that certain equipment that's used on film sets in a professional way comes from a consumer model. So you think, okay, I can go and buy a MacBook Pro, and that's a professional piece of equipment. It isn't. It's a consumer-grade piece of equipment. I've had jobs where a hard drive will turn up because the producer's gone and bought it, the hard drive, and said, okay, this is the hard drive you're going to use. And they bought it from Target, and it was in a returned box, and we opened up the hard drive, plugged it in, and someone had taken the internal hard drive out and replaced it with an old hard drive that was so slow and had all their family pictures on it. And the producer's saying, well, what's the problem? It's still a drive. So
and it was cheap.
And it was really cheap. But you're combating this. It's like there's this weird blend between what is professional approach and what is this new approach, with all these tools in the middle that vary in this price range, it's a very strange time in that respect.
And a lot of the issues with, now we have color correct monitors. I was over with Mark Whitegarter's session, listening to them talking about how do you deal with HDR in production, and the idea that you want to have something like live grade with power windows, so you can actually do power windowing on set on the HDR monitor, so you know what you're getting before you send it off to post. We have all this capability, and so everyone clusters around. Everyone's a color expert. Craft Services wants to adjust that window down there, and the cable puller says, well, give me a window down there to lose my cable. You're there until midnight before you've exposed a single shot. So the culture has to evolve in terms of who can put their 2 cents in on set. And the fact that we have all these tools and the picture is available to everyone doesn't mean that everyone has to have feedback on that picture. You can take the live grade and feed a Teradek color and then feed a color corrected image to everyone's iPad. They can walk around the set wirelessly and look at what they've got. And that's a very empowering thing. But with great power comes great responsibility. You have to limit who has that power to feedback and slow down and come up the production. So really looking at the chains of command and the chains of responsibility, that has to evolve, and the lines have to be redrawn to accommodate the new technology without bogging down the entire production flow. So this is a social evolution that goes with a technical evolution.
It used to be that the only people talking about the image were the DP and the lab contact. There was just you and him. They're the only person who'd really seen, who knew what was going on, so saw everything. So you call up the grader at the lab and say, you give you your printer lights and tell you that the negative was okay, and then you start discussing, how to make the print and what kind of print stock you're going to use. And that conversation was very, very limited. And now that's expanded to incorporate lots of people. Like the amount of times that I will have to call up the editor and say, just please apply 709 to all my log C footage, because they'll just basically start cutting the log C. And then the director sees it and he's a bit upset at first. Then after a while, he gets seduced by the log C footage. And now all of a sudden you're seeing commercials.
The Samsung commercial look.
That is basically log C ungraded, that people have got used to looking, and that's the look now. So it's completely removed from your hands. It's these tools that we're trying to develop are trying to harness that control back in our direction so we can be authors of the image. But we need to get everyone to play that game. And at the moment, the divisions between cinematography, production design, and the editorial department specifically, we need to bridge those gaps some way, so we can kind of take control of that.
And this gets back to that transparent flow of metadata through the entire production process across the silos. And I think one of the big problems with it is, as with slating, as with shooting, color, a color chart at the head of each shot, it's a little bit of extra work to get that stuff into the system to begin with. It pays huge benefits downstream, but doing that little extra bit of work, there's resistance to that. And so it's, how do we prove the value of the workflow before people will engage in the workflow?
Well, there's a thing with people who do grading for a living. They don't want to see the chart. They want it to look like a mess so they can fix it. And it really is part of their skill set. They show the director this kind of ungraded mush, which is all log C. They say, this is what you've got. But this is what I did. And the director goes, oh, wow, you're fantastic.
You're worth $600 an hour.
Yeah, I know. The amount of times I've gone into grading suites and said to the grader, just do me a favor, just take off all of what you've done and put 709 on top and just play it all at 709. And the director looks at it and goes, oh, man, that feels like it's really together. I said, well, that's because we haven't done anything. He said, no, but I thought it was that. He said, no, that was the log C footage. That was without the 709 LUT, that was just the basic viewing LUT. And you explain these basic concepts to them, but it's still those battles we're still fighting. It's crazy. Like we're 5 years into this and we're still fighting that same battle.
I think you have to look at the different markets. You guys, I think, are concentrating on the high-end studio, television, and movie world. And for them, you've had pushback with something like that. The younger generation, perhaps my age 30, that sort of demographic, would look at that and be like, in a second, makes sense. You have to look at the next generation that would look at that as the primary capture and what you've created. And that's what I see happening more and more, is like, you just created a camera that's using it. Like, that's, like, you think there's people who would be like, I can't even use that as a viewfinder, yet the next generation who will come and replace that old guard.
If any of you guys
will
shoot a
capture with
movie on
that.
this thing, I'll come to your house and beat you. Just to let you know, all right?
Do you
Now
know,
that's
do you know what they're
customer
doing
service.
at this? What NAB is? What about 90% of NAB is pushing right now? 90% of the money for this entire thing, our segment, the cinema market, is this.
Yes.
The broadcast market is the rest of it, and the YouTubers are the other. They're pushing this times 100. I'm not saying, and that's not what we're talking about. That might be what you're respecting, but if you look at the relative market, that's what's happening.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
it's not just the high-end cinema work that's having these exact same issues. One of my good friends does a lot of corporate and commercial work in the San Francisco Bay Area. He is increasingly not invited to the grade. His notes are increasingly not conveyed to the grade. And the director or the producer is going in to the grade and saying, try this, let's do this, without any attention being paid to his creative intent in making his commercial subjects look really good on set. And in a way, the move away from a 709 type camera to a log capable camera has just made his job harder because he can't bake in the look the same way. And this is happening, from local spots all the way up to feature films. So it's a larger cultural problem the way the industry works. It's not just segmented in one part of it.
So how do we fix that? I mean, this goes all the way from what Matt was saying, from pre-viz all the way to the on-set stuff, to the metadata that you guys are mentioning. What is the next steps that we have to do as an industry to fix this problem of miscommunication or complete lack of communication?
Well, there's people fixing it by themselves in different ways. So one of the ways to fix it as a cinematographer is to say, okay, I'm going to shoot this movie for you, but I'm also going to provide you with the first pass grade. So you set up with Resolve or with LiveGrade or any other of the systems that you that will fit in with the workflow that it works for the editing department, because you want to give them something that they can handle. So you're being dictated to what your finishing software is going to be, and you take the first pass yourself and you give that to the director as a first look, and then you're on that seduction thing again. You need to seduce them into understanding that you have a vision that you're seeing all the way through. Now that's a pretty tedious thing for a cinematographer to do these days, is to try and make that happen. But I know a number of DPs who are doing it quite successfully. So maybe there's an angle there. But what I would like to see is that the metadata that we create on set, a planning that comes through a Patrick software, makes it all the way through to the editors, and they respect it. At the moment, I think there's a respect issue.
Agreed.
Because they don't want to value it, because it devalues themselves. What they want to say is, I can add value to this by demeaning the people behind me just a little bit, and it might not even be conscious. But it's part of the mentality that's there. I would like to think that my getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going to a location with the director to watch the sun come up and take some pictures and talk for 3 hours about how this person walks through this forest and how much smoke we need and how much light we need is relevant to the person who sees that image for the first time when it pops up in Navid. That they've thought that these people have really thought about this, rather than think, stuff it, I'm going to make it green.
Well, DPs are, especially before you had accurate monitors on set and you were shooting film, I feel like are relatively broad strokes as far as lighting. The angle and that stuff is within your control, but for the exposure, control, color are relatively broad strokes. It doesn't matter if you're using Dados, it's a broad stroke. The tool set that someone has in Resolve is infinitely fine with tracking and feathering, things that would not be possible to even recreate there. And I think most cinematographers who also learn Resolve have a great respect and collaboration with their colorists. The first DPI I spoke with in New York City was Max Goldman, and it was with film. A cinematographer is like the first half. It really is. And the colorist, especially now with Resolve being free and the young people learning it, that's the second half of it. And especially as we shoot, again, away from Rec 709, we walk away. We're not there. We're not getting paid for that. So it really ends up, I believe, as possibly a business model and relationship, is a deep, deep connection with your colorist and having a relationship together. Like for commercials, that's not all segments, but I know the commercial DPs, they create their own looks for Log C. They don't use the baked-in one, and you have to have that relationship with Company 3 or Night Shoes or whoever you're with, and that's what I've learned from a lot of the DPs. Like, you need to know your colorist. Like, go to their wedding, you need to be hanging out with them at the bar, and then need to like be able to like have that relationship, because they're doing so much. You're a broad stroke. You're like, we're a daytime exterior, you're backlighting a certain exposure, and we're going to fill in with like some sort of exposure here, and it's fine because you're flying, but in grading, you're changing tiny little things. So I think it's the natural. It really is the second half of it, and on set, we would never even be able to necessarily control it to that level.
And that is the ideal situation where you have that very tight synergy between production and post. Structurally, that often isn't possible. And I wish I had a solution to that. If I could write an app to solve that, I'd be rich. Well, actually, no one would buy it because it goes against the standard way of doing things. But it really is a structural issue within the way the industry is put together, and I don't have a good solution for it. DPs who are big enough names can often work the situation where they can get their favorite colorist on a project and have that deep collaborative engagement. But again, people at the lower level, they may be very good, but they may be off on another job when the show goes into the grading suite, and they're not invited. Sometimes they are specifically disinvited because they're gumming up production in another part of the budget under another budget authority, and that input isn't wanted, regardless of whether the creative intent is being conveyed, because that's not what the people who are setting the budgets and the schedules are interested in. I don't know how to solve that.
Yeah, but a friend of mine shot the. Sorry.
I want to, because that's an interesting point, because I don't think the solution kind of to get a more streamlined creative and technical workflow is not like new products, but like moving the awareness from the people who are working on set and in post-production to where the money comes from. But this is a longer lasting process because it's really a people process. It's like being aware of technical processes and things. You mentioned the kind of the YouTubers younger generation. If the production is like in one head, we don't talk about these projects of handling metadata from kind of one process step to the other because it's in one head. So we don't have the problem that much. It's much more when a lot of people are involved and you have like strict processes. So I think if you could sit down with production people and tell them what really they would save if creative intents from finishing and the DP are not competing against each other, how much faster and streamlined it could be. But it's hard. I mean, you have to spend that time, sit down and explain and make aware of all these nasty details that we're talking about, from XML files to whatever things that are very technological or organizational.
It's already happening. Look at the showrunners of Game of Thrones. How many pieces of that? But how singular the vision comes out. I just had dinner with Ari and the first AC from Fargo, and they give the showrunners and the producers from the top down allow freedom and enable the workflow, and so it's already happening.
Yeah, it's not a completely bleak picture. The industry is changing, and there are productions like that have seen the future and are moving happily towards it. So it's not an entirely pessimistic picture we're painting here.
Not entirely. A friend of mine worked. He was a DP on Get Out, and that's a Blumhouse movie. So they've got these caps in terms of what they'll spend. So Blumhouse doesn't spend any more than $5 million on a picture that's not in sequel. So they'll spend more on Insidious or one of their other films that make money on a regular basis. But anything that's untried, they'll spend sub $5 million. And they also set these caps on what you can do. So you can shoot on an Alexa, but you can't shoot an ARRI RAW. I had to shoot in ProRes Quad 4. And then they have all the grading is all in-house. Now, all of these things are quite limiting, but they also add an opportunity for the cinematographer because going into the project who the grader is. And you can establish that relationship. Now, when I'm shooting a movie, that's what I try and do. I try and find someone who's going to be grading the movie and get something going. But when it comes to grading the film, about 20% of the time it's going to be that person. It might be somebody else. So if you can get a team together and you're all on the same page and that colorist is working with you and you work towards a vision, that's all part of this flow that we're talking about where the metadata becomes relevant. Within the Blumhouse model, it's actually quite a good one in that they produce very high quality films on very small budgets because they have a really good creative and technical workflow to tie it all together. Get Out looks fantastic for the amount of money they spent on it. It's really, truly amazing a bit of work. But the diversity of workflows, the workflow for the film industry was absolutely set. You'd shoot your neg, you send it to the lab, they would neg cut it, you would have a contact there, you knew who it was months in advance because there's only half a dozen of these guys even around, and you just knew what it would be, and you establish a relationship and it goes forward in one way. Now there's 1,000 ways of doing a workflow, and maybe that will calm down a little bit and form something a bit more predictable, but at the moment we're in Cowboyville for metadata and workflow.
Ari's doing a good job. I mean, I think what they're pushing forward, like if you shoot log C with a mini and you finish your Premiere, the LUT that's in it comes downstream. You actually have to turn it off in Premiere, and these are consumer-facing software.
Yeah.
And they're doing high-end as well. There's new bridge software that they're developing to bring even more of that metadata with it. So I think within their ecosystem that they're keeping semi-proprietary, they are definitely moving towards that, especially with lenses as well. Like with their LDS lenses, like all that data is coming through. You kind of have to stay within the area ecosystem to have it be bona fide by them.
I went to Munich to talk to Ari about 6 years ago, and we made an application called Toland with the American Society of Cinematographers, and it's a cinematography calculator. But I was playing with the first generation Alexas, and they were talking about access of control over the Alexa and creating metadata flow from the camera. And so Ari allowed us to create a patch whereby we could control the camera remotely, and we did this with Toland as our control interface. And I could do everything with it. I could turn the camera on and off, I could change the camera speed, I could even set the camera on fire by turning off all the cooling functions on the sensor, which would eventually make the thing burst into flames, which of course they didn't like very much. But the whole power of this was quite a long time ago was something that we had access to, and that we could have taken it forward and made these connections, the camera metadata, through to other parts of the film industry, particularly to how it connects the camera with post-production. But there's such little stomach for it that Ari has been aware of this for a long time, and it's leaking out in little bits, but we're still quite a way away from having metadata be anywhere near as powerful and relevant as it could be.
And what maybe 10 years ago was that one ecosystem was the reality, now is like you have such many manufacturers and cameras. So the multi-vendor camera shoot is kind of the standard, I think.
Yeah.
So if you're leaving that ecosystem and your nice workflow breaks, that's where you're like really getting into trouble. So that's why we see why I think the LiveGrade is and Silverstack is quite popular, because we try to abstract over, no matter if it's a GoPro or a Phantom camera, you get the metadata that's out of the camera, and it sounds and looks like the same interface, even if some fields are empty. So I think the camera vendors themselves are not really able to kind of solve such problems themselves, because they will always have some idea of protecting a little bit, at least. We're 2 streets away from ours.
Oh, you're talking about the dreaded word proprietary.
Yeah, I try to avoid that, but yeah. So that's one of the aspects. Like the ideas are there, but somehow there needs to be an agreement. So I just wanted to bring in I didn't want to mention standards, but
no, that's the most relevant thing. Is that that with lens standards for lens metadata, there's 3 or 4 different systems. There's the ARRI system, there's the I system from Cook. There are a bunch of different ways of doing it. But the metadata that flows out of the lens should be standard metadata that everyone can agree on. And the other layer to this is there's no universal timecode, and without universal timecode, we're totally boned. Now I try to get UTC to work. We developed a small box that was basically inside the box was a couple of baked GPS clocks that used to refer to the overhead satellites, little atomic clocks that keeps the box accurate, spitting out timecode, just timecode by itself, to a very, very high degree of accuracy, around about like 1 second in 1,000 years. So it's very, 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 very accurate. And the whole idea would be that you put one of these boxes on set, everything that gets turned on looks at the box, looks at every other device, all gets in sync, and then that timecode just melts away into the background. So no one ever thinks about, oh, is this camera in sync anymore? Is this a microphone in sync with that microphone or that iPhone or this iPad or that monitor? They're just in sync. And once you've got universal timecode, everything that has metadata is relevant. So you could pull your phone out and then write a note to yourself that could be scraped back into production as metadata later on. Like, for example, I'm doing a shoot outside, someone walks through frame, you stop and say, hey, what's your name? You write the name down, you don't get a model release, but you can find that person because that data exists somewhere. And that's the kind of stuff that we need in the film industry, is and not just this point-to-point solution for metadata, but something that actually drags all the information into something which is meaningful. That's the really big challenge in the future, and there's absolutely no interest in solving that problem at all. It's something that, if it gets solved, could really help us all out, but there's no stomach to do anything about it whatsoever.
So we're just about time, and I wanted to ask one last question, which I think you sort of already answered. But what do you think? What's next? what's the next step in the technology? Again, I think, Nick, that was a pretty appropriate answer, is that link from set to post and everywhere else.
With the boring metadata part?
Yes. Well, you said it wasn't that boring in your household.
I don't care who solves this problem. I really don't care. I mean, if we could get a system within my company to work that we can get people to agree to, that would be great. If metadata gets sorted as some kind of standard that pulls in all of the proprietary issues that Patrick brought up, that would be wonderful. Would help us out a lot. But in terms of what's happening with camera technology, we've got 8K coming at us from NHK sometime soon. That's going to be the next an HDR. That's the next really big issue.
I meant specifically within the software and everything, the tools that you guys are creating. That was sort of more my point. Was what do you think is next? Again, just last questions because we're running out of time. But anyone else want to jump in?
So what our regular homework is integration, really. So really talking to different vendors. So you were talking about lens. So today we've had Zeiss and Cook people on our booth. Like we were talking. So before that, might just the only interface where they were meeting was the mount of the camera. And now, as things become more digital, interfaces are like virtual. So talking to each other as vendors, I think, is an important thing. And so I don't think it's a certain technology leap or jump, but it's like talking to each other and finding ways of making things happening in the background and then showing solutions that might be beyond one ecosystem and that integrates things that are from more vendors. That's at least what I believe will work better in this world than it did 20 years ago.
Adam or Matt, your thoughts? Yeah.
The devices are getting powerful enough, connectivity is getting universal enough that, again, having background tasks that automate a lot of these annoying manual processes so that script notes will automatically convey, so that the model release will automatically get issued, so that the metadata flows becomes less of something we have to worry about as a hassle. It just happens in the background, and huge synergies will arise because of that. But it might be a couple of decades before we get there.
Matt?
We're going to stop using single sensor cameras and capturing from a single point. Optics as we know it becomes irrelevant. Cameras as we know it change completely. Post-production as we know it changes completely.
Look for a new job, basically.
Wow, yeah. Well, on that bombshell, I guess that concludes our panel. I want to thank everyone on stage. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Patrick, Nick, Adam, Matt, thank you so much. You guys are the best. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.